And welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Cannane. Coming up, is the new Parliament any closer to finding that elusive Deputy Speaker? Julia Gillard creates another 2 jobs for Coalition MPs, this time on her Climate Change Committee. And world leaders scramble to save the Middle East peace talks as Israel fails to extend a ban on the building of settlements. Our panel tonight from Radio National Breakfast, Fran Kelly, Sue Cato, the principal of PR company Cato Council, and in Canberra, former senior Labor advisor Greg Turnbull. Well, all eyes are on Canberra today on the eve of the new Parliament's first sitting. As MPs make their way back to Capitol Hill, Prime Minister Julia Gillard has unveiled the lineup and goals of the new Climate Change Committee.
And our priorities as a government are in 3 areas: supporting renewable energy, promoting energy efficiency and working towards the introduction of a price on carbon. And as a government, we have consistently said that in order to tackle climate change, in order to cut carbon pollution to the extent that we need to put a price on carbon.
Which was announced today is repugnant because it has a test that somebody must sign up to a preordained outcome. I am not aware, and we are not aware, of any such belief test on a parliamentary committee in the last 110 years.
Greg Hunt there, the opposition's climate change spokesperson. Fran Kelly, this committee seems to be designed to get a price on carbon, doesn't it?
It is designed to get a price on carbon. As we just heard, the Prime Minister says to be a member of this committee, you have to believe that the economy needs to move forward to that, in line with the advice from Treasury and others that a carbon price is an economic reform that we need if we're going to have any chance of moving towards a low emissions economy, and to help develop the renewable energy industry for a start. So that is the starting point. We're not reinventing the wheel in this committee. I think that this is an idea that the independents were quite keen on, that we not just throw away work done, extensive work done by people like Professor Ross Garnaut, that we don't waste all that work. We revisit it, we go back to the table, we as a nation, and we look at what are the options. And there's new options being talked about now. Last Parliament was all about an emissions trading scheme. Now we have Marius Kloppers and others talking about a carbon tax.
Some people talking about a hybrid
Tony
model.
Windsor says, I like some direct action in there. I like the notion of direct action as well. If you think about it, the Coalition's direct action plan, well, they're against a carbon tax, but that actually has a price on carbon built into it as part of it. So I think there is no escaping the fact that if we are going to move, we're going to put in place the renewable energy legislation, which we have. We're going to intensify our energy efficiency, which is a good idea. Nationally, and the government should have moved on that in the last election, I think. Those things are all very well, but without a price on carbon, you don't bring it home, if you like. You don't underpin the economy to give real might to those other alternatives.
And Sue, Julia Gillard seems very... she seems like she wants to consult business on this. She set up a business roundtable to monitor this as well.
But she clearly doesn't want another mining tax dispute in her hands. But let's face it, the real difference this time, and Fran and I agree, there's new science, new people talking, but the real difference this time is you've got the Greens at the table with the government. So rather than the Greens being shut out, you've actually got the Greens working with the government, with the independents. So clearly there's going to be a lot of politics. Clearly we're going to see the Coalition bombing. Clearly the Coalition have said they're not going to take up those 2 committee spots. So, this time we've probably got a chance of an outcome.
And we wouldn't be at this point if the Greens weren't in the position of power that they're in negotiating that. Julia Gillard had said we will not put a price on carbon in this term, though she did say that she and the government, she and Labor were committed to a price on carbon and to moving the nation towards that, but she had ruled it out this term. It's true that because we're in this hung parliament situation, that the Greens had the power to say, OK, we want to move on this now. And that's the outcome.
Greg Turnbull, how will the Greens go negotiating with Labor on this? Because there wasn't much negotiation during the last Parliament.
Well, that's exactly right, but I think, as we all know, things have changed significantly since then, and I think now it's very significant that the Greens will be inside the tent, as it were. I believe that this committee, it's been announced, will actually be meeting in the Cabinet room. They'll be bound by secrecy. Further reasons, I think that one can understand why the knee-jerk reaction of the opposition might have been to stay out, but I think the Coalition might come to regret not being in this committee and at least giving the appearance at these early stages of wanting to contribute to what somebody once called the greatest moral challenge of our time.
Greg, how could the Coalition be a party to this if it was secret?
Well, I think the problem is if you go down the track after the period when the Greens get control of or at least the balance of power of the Senate at the second half of next year, something will come forward from this committee, and then the coalition will be in the position of criticising it and not being part of it when they've been no part of it and not been in the discussions. All I'm suggesting is that this is another example, another indication that the approach of Tony Abbott will be to be a warrior against this government and not to go any way at all towards appearing to compromise and take part in a national discussion on this issue.
But let's back a bit for a moment. I mean, the fact is the coalition can't agree on its position on climate change and how it's going to play. So, I mean, quite frankly, Tony Abbott's playing bombing, but, you could argue he had no alternative. What was he going to do? Put one person who believed in climate change and getting a price and one person who didn't?
Well, he could have put Malcolm Turnbull in.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, they publicly have agreed because Malcolm Turnbull, although he's saying his position hasn't changed, he is not publicly advocating against his party yet, now that he's joined Shadow Cabinet. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But how could they sign up to this given that their policy is we do not support a price on carbon? The only problem with that policy is 10 months ago, not only did they support it, they were working with the government behind closed doors to work out how to deliver it. And I think the trap in this for the coalition, depending on how this whole parliament works, I suppose, is that this is a real example of a collaborative process. Yes, it's behind closed doors, that's so people can speak freely within it, but it's unusual to have such a collaborative process in a way, with all these members around a table from these different parties, and the opposition is deciding to take itself outside of that, which is, I think, how it's going to behave in this whole parliament, obviously.
The other point, friend, if I could just quickly say, the fact is it is secret, and the coalition's used that as an example of saying, well, that's why we don't want to be involved. I think that's one of the reasons they should be involved. I mean, Tony Abbott will get a lot of intelligence about what the government's thinking, likely to do on this important subject if he had a couple of people in there.
I've got to say, I was a little bit surprised when I read the grab, and I haven't seen it, but I read the grab of Bob Brown saying a little bit of secrecy was an OK thing if you got the result you wanted in the end. I'm wondering how often we're going to hear that in this campaign. Well,
that's true, but if you think of it as a cabinet subcommittee, which is the structure that's been put around this, cabinet committees, of course, are secret. So if we heard that this was a cabinet committee looking at a price on carbon, we wouldn't be surprised. We're only surprised because it's something broader than that. And this is not just parliamentary members; they're inviting in 4 experts too.
Yeah, we should run through a few of them. Will Stephan, who's the executive of the ANU Climate Change Institute. Also Rod Sims, who has a long history of government and also business. Patricia Faulkner, who's a specialist in social inclusion, so I assume that that's to do with finding out how people on low incomes can deal with
how to
increased
compensate
bills.
for the impact of this, the price impact of this.
And also, of course, Ross Garneau is involved in it as well.
So he gets another go around again, and they're asking him to update his white paper.
And guys, what a broad church we have in the new Cabinet of Australia.
Yes, indeed.
That's for sure. OK, well, Kevin Rudd also was talking about climate change over the weekend. He was at the UN in New York, and he said pretty much that climate change should be about deeds, not words. Here he is.
Put even more starkly, we must do that which we say. If we have a conference on disarmament, it should do disarmament, not pretend. If we say we have a convention on climate change, it must do the job to tackle climate change, not just talk about it.
Unfortunate that I thought we should do that which we say on climate change, because of course that's what brought him undone.
Maybe he's learned from his mistakes.
Maybe
come
he
on,
has.
guys, you're being harsh. You're being harsh. All of the writing of history does say that he actually wanted it and wasn't backed.
Well, I think what it illustrates is that now the UN's copping a bit of what the Rudd cabinet copped. The schoolmaster up there ticking them off.
Yeah, true. True, but, given that he was criticised so roundly for being all talk and no action, it was an interesting theme that he took the way he expressed it, I thought, at the UN.
It was, and so soon
Fair point, though.
Well.
I mean, obviously what he's saying, because, he was stung at Copenhagen. He and Penny Wong worked slavishly. They worked day and night, as we now famously know. Kevin Rudd didn't, I think he got 2 hours sleep in 48 hours at Copenhagen to try and get an outcome, and they didn't, because basically it wasn't organised properly.
And let's also look at the politics for Kevin. I mean, all of us live and breathe the nuances and so on, but for I hate to use the word retail because it's been overused. I mean, for the wider audience, they don't see the UN as the bureaucratic nightmare and the non-for-profit organisation that it actually is. So Kevin Rudd calling for change, calling for action on climate change works for the government, it works for Kevin Rudd.
That's true. Well, following Alex Somlei's decision to end his on-again, off-again bid to be Deputy Speaker, Labor is still hunting for a Liberal to stand as Harry Jenkins' deputy. Now, federal government frontbencher Anthony Albanese has accused the opposition of pressuring Liberal MP Alex Somlei to pull out of a deal to take on the Deputy Speaker position, but Mr Somlei says it was his own decision.
The reason I decided not to go ahead with it because you know, this has become the issue. The issue is now how is the Deputy Speaker going to vote. I rang Tony Abbott and I told him my decision this morning that I won't go ahead with it. It's a pity because I was committed to carrying out these parliamentary reforms. You know, I'm quite passionate about them.
And there were murmurs this afternoon that Liberals MP Peter Slipper had been missing from both the Liberal Party room meeting as well as the Joint Party room meeting. But since he's come out and said his absence is unrelated to the Deputy Speaker role. Greg Turnbull, all these rumours around Parliament House today, is this signs of what it might be like in the future?
I think it just shows how skittish things are now, and they might, you know, it might be a long 3 years if that's the case. Every time anyone goes to the bathroom during a party room meeting, somebody's going to think they've gone to the other side.
Greg, it is going to be a long 3 years if it lasts for 3 years. I mean, look, you know, you said there Labor's still hunting for a Liberal. I mean, it's such a funny concept. But, you know, no doubt Peter Slipper just had a dental appointment. But I thought what was funny was that this story was allowed to run all afternoon without Anthony Albanese or anyone on Labor side saying, no, it's not true. So they were clearly winding up the coalition too. Everyone, as Greg said, a little bit skittish.
And can I just say, poor Peter Slipper, what a long dental appointment that had to be. I mean, it was an all-day dental appointment with...
I think there's a case now. There's a case now on behalf of the party whips for all members of Parliament to get a microchip inserted, like your pets, so that wherever they are, somebody knows.
It's like MP Cam. You know, you've got Alex Cam and Peter Cam.
We'll have global tracking devices fitted to these people.
I think they're going to need more than a global tracking device. I think they're also going to need a little zapper. So if someone steps out of the market, it's going and drags them back in.
I think it's a job creation program. We just assign an unemployed person to every MP to make sure they're there at every important vote.
Hey, it brings a new meaning to the word whip, doesn't it? You know, back in.
It does. Now, Fran, what was going on with that whole Alex Somlei thing? Because, you know, in a statement on the weekend, he said, I was interested in the Deputy Speakership as a way of helping to implement parliamentary reform. Now that the vote of the Deputy Speaker has become the focus of attention, I'm no longer interested in the position. What, he didn't think it was going to become the focus of attention?
Well, to be fair, he probably didn't to quite the degree it has until it was probably quite firmly pointed out to him by Joe Hockey or Tony Abbott or somebody. I mean, I don't know who rang Alex Somlei, but I imagine that he was annoyed. He didn't get the whip's job he was offered. It was given to Warren Inch at the last minute, and I think that really annoyed him. So I think he was flattered to be offered this. He is a committed parliamentarian. He's on his way out. He's only got another 3 years. So I think he was probably happy to have the status and the role and the involvement, and a little bit of extra money. It's not much, so I don't think it'd be that particularly. But it's definitely some more standing. But then, of course, it did already become a media circus, and maybe thinking it through or having explained to him that every time there was a vote or, you know, the Parliament looked like getting a little bit wobbly, then the focus would be on what was Alex Somlei going to do. He's not a bloke who's had a lot of time in the limelight. I don't think that's his thing. He's quite clearly said it clearly, and I believe him. He didn't want to be a Liberal rat. He probably did want to, you know, say, here's one up to you for not giving me the whip's job, this is what you get. But I think in the end, after some pressure, what he's said is what he means, is that he doesn't really want to be involved in controversy for the next 3 years.
So Labor's trying to make it out as if he was kneecapped by Tony Abbott.
I don't know if he was kneecapped, although he was sitting in his car, so he didn't seem standing. But sorry, I've taken this very serious. Sorry. But look, I think you've been very generous. I don't think it would have been one phone call. I think it would have been many phone calls.
Pressure, maximum pressure.
Yeah, and also, look, I seriously disagree. I absolutely think he knew what was going on. He knew what it was going to cause. To your point, he did cause some pain to people who hadn't given him the job. There's no love lost between Mr Somlei and many people in the Liberal Party.
I think you're right. This went on for 9 days, apparently, the talks with the Labor.
So this is brutal stuff. And what's interesting is that they've pulled Slipper into line and they've pulled Somlei into line. So, you know, we're seeing brute politics on the Liberal side, and I think Tony Abbott used the word ferocious in the last 24 hours, and I think anyone who thinks that they're going to sort of play the game and get away with it, I think forget